It's been a very eventful journey so far, and we're only just getting started. Before I can tell you about who I am now, I must first go back to who I was. My name is Morsel, and this is my story. For the longest time, I had always felt this sort of separation, like something was pulling me away from the rest of society. I struggled to fit in, and honestly sometimes still do. A black swan, as some would say. I had many health problems with regular visits to the hospital, severe asthma attacks trying to charge me my soul on several occasions, and combining that with a family history of heart problems that took several family members' lives away, I thought I might be next. Joints that couldn't hold up, and a body always calling in sick. Besides the physical, growing up I had extreme social anxiety, and being outside around people felt unbearable. And as a late bloomer, I was a very short and skinny kid in comparison to my peers, often forcefully fed because I refused to eat. These together made me an easy target for bullying, sometimes subtle, but many times openly, verbally, physically and racially. And being the easy target only pushed me further into myself, and the more it happened, the more I withdrew. It's interesting, however, because although I stood out, I felt mostly invisible. And when you're treated like you don't belong for long enough, you stop questioning other people, and you start questioning yourself. I hated being at school, and home was no better. The family dysfunction drove me insane, so I did the only thing I knew how to do, which was isolate myself. And before I realized it, I started hating myself too. However, the isolation was a blessing in disguise. Why? Because I had so much free time on my hands. Now this is a dangerous position to be in, because you either use it to make you or break you, and I think I did a bit of both. Although I hated it at the time, as I was beyond lonely, this is what I believe now to be God's guidance. It will all make sense later. So I spent the majority of my time alone behind the screen, binge watching self-improvement videos, essentially searching for a way out. Also because it was the only time I could feel like someone was actually talking to me directly, guiding and advising me, even if they were to never know of my existence. At around the age of 15, I joined my school gym. Now this would be the very start of a huge turning point in my life, but I didn't know it yet. I wouldn't know it until many years later, in fact. I went in one day out of curiosity and was instantly taken in by the school's gym instructor. Her name was Miss Young. She showed me the basics of fitness and how to perform the fundamentals. She saw my commitment and took me seriously. Now I know I've always said I've done my fitness journey alone, and it is still true, because literally just a few months in, I gave it up all of a sudden. I knew I wanted this to be part of my life, but I wasn't ready for the commitment just yet. For the next several months up until the age of 16, I wouldn't train. But in the back of my head, I always knew I would one day come back to it. I had no idea why I wouldn't just start where I was, but like I said, I just knew it would happen soon. One day, I was watching some motivational gym content and a Calisthenics video popped up. I still didn't really know what Calisthenics was yet, but it intrigued me a lot. Now, I've always been somewhat athletic. I grew up as a swimmer from a very young age, competed once when I think I was 13, and completed 2 swim-a-thons some time later. Played a lot of football with my brothers and I had some basic fitness knowledge already. So at 16, I got back into training and decided I wanted to start mastering my body weight. Now a friend of mine at the time pulled off a handstand out of nowhere. It wasn't the best, but I had never seen a handstand before in person, and it genuinely blew my mind. And the idea of being able to do it myself was motivating. Now that I was back in the school gym again, my direction of training was different. I was teaching myself a handstand and continued to get stronger on the basics in the meantime. It was very frustrating, however, thinking I'd never get it. But 2 months passed by, and after a ridiculous number of falls later, I started holding my body upside down. I wanted to give up so many times while learning this move, and honestly nearly did. But the feeling of being able to do something I once saw as impossible triggered something in me. I can do hard things. Because I could only access the school gym on such few occasions, I spent most of my time training outdoors at my local park, which had nothing but a pull-up bar and ladders. I spent almost every day there, no matter the weather. Whether it was cold, dark, rainy, it did not matter. I was going to train. It was the only time I could feel at peace. Well, sort of. The only time I could channel the negative energy that I'd be carrying all day into something useful. At this point, I was serious and consistent, and not a day was missed. Some time later, a random dude pulls up to the park to train alongside me. He does a chicken wing muscle up, and again I was astonished. I thought I was quite strong already at this point, but this just showed me there's so much more out there and I had no idea yet. So now my training sessions involved me constantly fighting my way over the bar. No technique or understanding of the movement, just kipping and kicking for attempts on end, slamming my chest on the bar again and again. I knew I wouldn't quit, just like with the handstand. And a month after almost breaking my chest later, I got my first chicken wing muscle up, and I felt on top of the world, quite literally. I think it's safe to say that this is usually the most rewarding accomplishment for most calisthenics athletes. Progress continued being made, and very quick. By 17 I had already unlocked clean muscle ups for reps, the human flag and its variations, handstand push-ups for reps just a month after unlocking the handstand hold, a few one-arm pull-ups, a not so bad form full planche that only took me a few months of casual attempts, the iron neck hang that I achieved in a few days on a horrible bar with no chalk, plus the front lever and much more. It wasn't always a smooth ride, however, and I had my fair share of failures and injuries, far too many that were never clipped. From concussions, to almost losing my eyeball and becoming blind in one eye. Bruises and my hands constantly ripping, it was quite difficult. These injuries also made me start to question if this was really all worth it at one point. Now the mental struggles were still present. The reason I made so much progress was because still I had so much time for myself. I never really had a proper childhood and I didn't go out much. I didn't have many to hang out with. Don't get me wrong, however, I did go out occasionally, and it was always with the same person. Now this guy has been with me since the beginning of secondary school. We got into urbex at one point and would occasionally go explore whatever we could. Those are the moments I look back on and cherish, but most of my time was still spent alone, spent in training. I became obsessed with it and kept learning more. This is why I call loneliness a blessing. I had no bad company to be led astray by. It was mostly me and my grind. At this point I started becoming recognized as the fitness guy in school, as still no one else really knew what calisthenics was. Eventually many started joining me on this journey, and at one point the school gym was always full. I felt like I was slowly earning respect and would even guide the newcomers. It didn't take very long for everyone else who started their journey to slowly start quitting, however. One by one, I was the only one left, leaving me back to training alone again. Typical. I was always a naturally intelligent student. I didn't really need to study much and would often ace most exams. I hated the school educational system, however, and I knew I wouldn't take it seriously. I got my first phone at 17, but with no data. But it was around age 18, during my second year of A-levels, where I would spend all of my free periods in school watching calisthenics tutorials, before I'd go out to the local residential park behind my school playground to practice what I just learned. Every lunch break without fail, still in my uniform, I'd go and train. This was 3 years into my training journey. Finding time was never an excuse. If you truly want it, you'll find a way. By this time, I had managed to get myself a cheap swimming membership at the local leisure centre near my school, where I'd pretend to go swimming and then sneak up to the gym because I couldn't afford the gym membership. If I didn't have a lesson after my lunch break, I would bunk the final hours of school and go straight to the gym. My mental state here was still really low. In fact, it was getting much worse. All the dysfunction I was surrounded by as a child did not stop and kept progressing. I got kicked out for a short while, forcing me to stay in the gym until closing hours. The intense training was my only escape. I still hated who I was and despised the reflection looking back at me in the mirror, regardless of the physical progress being made. It got to the point where I did literally nothing in my day except for train. Later on in the year, I even bunked the classes I did have for several months straight. My teachers thought I dropped out because I stopped showing up. I really hated school and didn't want to study. In fact, I just despised everything going on around me. And what a surprise. Eventually I went from top scores to barely scraping a pass on all of my subjects. I was forced to stay behind for an additional year, meaning I did 3 years for A-levels. That's the college equivalent for those who don't follow the UK system. I still never tried in my 3rd year. I simply just didn't want to be there and had nowhere else to go. Somewhat luckily, that year, my exams were saved from an event that changed the world so suddenly and drastically. It was 2019. The COVID-19 pandemic had struck. So by the time our academic year was coming to an end, we had to go into lockdown just before we took our exams. Who would have thought this happened so long ago already? Life wasn't much different, except the fact I felt like I was dying after testing positive for COVID on 3 separate occasions. I just stayed in my room or trained at the local park where I had all the equipment netted so we couldn't even use it properly. Eventually the world started slowly opening up again. I couldn't keep a job. I kept either getting fired or laid off from multiple part-time jobs I'd pick up here and there. I was too mentally exhausted to find something to stick to. Now I enjoyed being creative, I learned to pencil draw, do origami, I'd read a lot, and I'd even spend a lot of time on the piano teaching myself how to play to a fairly high level. Now my life at home was still very troubling, and I was left with two choices: either go to university or get kicked out for good. So really, I was only left with one choice. In 2020, I started my first year of university. So at 19, I moved out of my family home to start a new life, one I was not particularly looking forward to. Mini lockdowns kept taking place. They closed the campus and then reopened, and then closed it again. And this was by far the loneliest time of my life. It feels weird to openly talk about this as one who doesn't usually show much emotion in general, but I'd break down in my room on a daily basis. I would very often emotionally eat, to the point I developed a binge eating disorder as well. It's ironic how we perform such acts to make ourselves feel better in the moment, only for it to make us feel much worse later. Escapism is not the way out, and it never will be, but we have to go through it to truly understand it. I was having panic attacks almost nightly and I couldn't sleep. I later developed chronic insomnia and my overall health was starting to fall apart. This is when I started to lose some progress on my fitness journey, as you can see here, although not too much physically, because remember, muscles do not necessarily equate to good health. I still trained to maintain a part of my sanity, but it wasn't enough. I was slowly losing it and I was beyond miserable. Although I don't regret these experiences, I found myself doing dangerous things like climbing cranes just to feel something, chasing a high and running from the police. I was a good kid though, I swear. But honestly, it's still to this date some of my favourite memories. Most wouldn't understand. The thrill of sitting on the edge of death, the strong winds blowing in your face while witnessing some of the most beautiful sunrises is no ordinary experience. It's when I felt most alive. And another one of my deepest fears was heights, so this was also a step closer towards self-mastery. I was terrified beyond imagination, but feel the fear and do it anyway. But honestly, deep down I just wanted to feel something other than this depressing emptiness. And at one point, after many months of feeling this way, I decided to log out. But I wanted to do it in a painless way. Now funnily enough, after doing some research, the prevention hotline kept showing up. I'd get frustrated and keep ignoring the obvious, scrolling past, adjusting my searches. I don't know what I was specifically looking for, to be honest, but then it hit me. I'm the person who needs this hotline. I'm not sure why though, but it made me laugh. I started to crack up and then slowly just broke down straight after. That release was really needed, and I soon knocked out to sleep after about 2 days of staying awake. A night I won't forget. Now I want to quickly add something here, as I think it's an appropriate time to mention. Now a lot of you don't know, but I'm Lebanese. However, I was born and raised in London my whole life. I used to visit back home on a yearly basis until the situation with the war at one point got really bad once again. I remember one time in Lebanon experiencing a live bomb go off as we were driving back home after being out, and the closer we got to home, the more we realized there was a street not too far from us. There was glass all over the roads and blood covering injured people everywhere. And then there were the recent bombings that took place when this cleared, a missile had struck our very neighborhood road. And then some time later, another family home got hit directly. Now I'm very grateful to be living in the UK safely. But the point is, seeing this along some of the other crazy events going on in this world made me truly realize how lucky some of us really are, although it did still hurt to watch. Some people really do go through extreme hardships, far worse than ours. And not to dismiss our problems, but rather reflect and appreciate that some people have had it worse and yet still thrive more than we do. So this should inspire us to do the same. Now returning to the previous point, the next morning I was hit with a sudden surge of motivational hope. Although I had no real plan, I wanted to change my life. I got back into training properly again. I tried my best to clean up my diet and get onto a consistent sleeping schedule. The sleep part was a myth, however. That just wasn't happening. Fast forward a few months, after completing one term of my course, I decided I couldn't remain on this program anymore. I would rehearse how I tell my parents I wanted to drop out. I was already in much debt for a subject I had no real interest in, and in accommodation that I felt trapped in due to these constant lockdowns, living away on campus with classes only hosted online that I always missed. After some convincing, they surprisingly agreed, but they were not happy to say the least, and considered me a failure to the family. But I personally didn't really care at this point. I had to fix my life, in my way and for me. I emptied my room, gave back the key, and in the middle of another lockdown, I was back home. Quick side note, I tried to pay back my debt as quickly as I could at the time, as they were threatening me with solicitors and to take me to court if I didn't do so quickly, because I did not complete my course and dropped out early. Bear in mind, I'm a student in lockdown. Well, was a student. Thinking it was finally finished 2 years later, I randomly find out now, in 2026, that there was still some left over that I was unaware of, and I was not contacted about it either. So for multiple years, thinking I was debt-free, interest was stacking up without my knowledge. And yeah, it's quite a big number, so you can imagine the added stress that's put me in. But anyway, back to the story. I instantly enrolled into personal training online to keep busy. At 20, qualifying as a level 2 fitness instructor, level 3 personal trainer, and level 4 nutrition coach. Now one day, I met someone at my new local gym who happens to do Cali. This is not the first gym near my school I was previously mentioning. So we got to speaking and he told me about a local competition that was being held soon. I was nervous to enter, but he encouraged me. The event was hosted by a team at the time called Calisthenics, who are no longer a thing unfortunately. I signed up on the day and did my thing. This was my first public performance, and as you can see, I was really rusty. I had lost a lot of strength from before and was quite nervous to perform in front of the crowd. But to no surprise, I didn't place. However, I genuinely felt good having partook, as I would have never expected myself to do such a thing. My anxiety was still there, but I was slowly taking control of it. Again, feel the fear and do it anyway. Also, it was amazing to finally see so many other calisthenics athletes out there just like myself, as for the longest time it was just me who trained it. This sparked a new motivation and I began working even harder for my next competition. In my second comp, I placed second, and in my third comp, nothing. But I was getting stronger every time. But from then on, I won the next. Then I won again. And I kept winning, and I was becoming recognized as one of the best calisthenics athletes in London, showing up to every event I could and partaking in them all. I was also the heaviest one every time. Now, as I said in the beginning, I would have never known that starting my fitness journey would land me here. It just had to play out. Sometimes it's the most unexpected doors that we open out of curiosity that leads us to the most amazing destinations. You just have to be willing to walk, however. Fast forward some time, at 22 years old, a charity known as Steel Warriors organized a big event. They hosted a group Guinness World Record attempt for the most number of handstands to be held simultaneously at one location. At the time I was also training for a world record, the longest one-arm handstand on a Bosa ball. I was doing it for myself however, unofficially, but I was sharing my progress online at the same time, and Steel Warriors without my knowing had set up an official Guinness World Record attempt for me to perform live in front of hundreds as a bonus special event. There were a few other extra group world records we were to attempt, which included the biggest squat jump relay, as well as the biggest Superman push-up relay. So I received a call one day telling me to get ready, as I have a few weeks to train for this. I was confused, but there was no time to question it. I had to prepare. The big day arrives, 12th of August 2023. I woke up drowsy with right shoulder pain, exactly what I needed. We failed every one of our attempts at the group records, especially the easy extras somehow. And lastly came my turn. It was the final event and all eyes on me. If I failed this too, we would all go home with nothing. But I would go home in devastation, so I knew how to make it work, although the pressure was beyond me. They gave me the signal to go, and 29 seconds later, I fell. In my head it was over. I was tired, but they offered me one more attempt, and I took it. Now I don't really want to say much else here, so I'm just gonna let it play for you.
I can now confirm that the time you achieved is 52.
So, I thought I had failed it, but to my surprise, a new world record was set. To be honest, I wasn't too happy about the number, as I've done much longer in training prior, and then broke the record again as shown in this clip. But I was mostly relieved that we didn't go home empty-handed. Now, I went home to so many messages congratulating me, and people telling me they were inspired. And finally, I felt like I was becoming somebody. Someone people could look up to. Someone who, when looked in the mirror, didn't necessarily hate the reflection looking back. Now, there was still a long way to go on this mental journey, but it doesn't mean I hadn't moved far enough yet. This once terrified little boy was making something of himself, and was showing others that they can too. For the next few years, from the ages 22 to now being 25, I made the switch from statics to street lifting. You see, all those years of intense stress on my joints had piled up, and my CNS was also very fried, and I was struggling to do much of statics at this point. I still entered a few competitions here and there just before the complete training transition, and I was still performing well, but I knew I couldn't maintain this for long. My body was starting to give out. I wouldn't know about some of the injuries I was dealing with until much later, and I would then be diagnosed with degenerative shoulder tendons, and both my thumbs had excess fluid in them which needed draining. Also, all my joints were inflamed. I had costochondritis, which is inflammation at the sternum, golfer's elbow, forearm tendonitis on both sides, and basically pain everywhere for years. To top it off, I was heavily sleep deprived for many years, so my body refused to heal. And to top it off again, recently I've been dealing with frequent nightmares and night terrors, and consecutive back-to-back sleep paralysis episodes, and I've seen some dark stuff in those. Basically, my body was turning against me. Now, I've always ignored the pain as my whole life had been painful anyway. It was yet another mental battle to go through, but no one took me seriously, and yet again no support was provided, so I just had to get on with it. With my knowledge and training experience, I was able to start making quick progress in street lifting, although it would have been much quicker without all of its trauma. Now, by this point, I pretty much stopped training statics, aside from a few sets here and there just for maintenance. Don't get me wrong, however, the thing is, this was still painful too nonetheless. It was just a bit more manageable than statics. Slowly, I began loving street lifting more and more. I was making pretty good progress, and I think my body is naturally more inclined towards it. I wanted to start competing in this field too, so I would keep training until the opportunity presented itself. Now, I hadn't actually started training for squats until 2025, so luckily the upcoming comps didn't have a squat involved, but I'm more than ready for it now. I entered my first street lifting competition and placed first, with my brother also joining the podium on his first comp as well. Soon later, my second competition, again I placed first, and again my brother joined me on the podium. Then there was the third comp, where I placed first and my brother followed in second. It's kind of expected when you have me as your coach. And then recently, 2 further categories on the same day, the advanced reps endurance and the 1 rep max, the same results. I have made it my goal to dominate the scene and become one of the world's best hybrid calisthenics athletes you will ever see, with street lifting being my main focus now. Remember how I mentioned I almost gave up on the handstand? Now imagine I did end it there and never went back to it. I'd never be where I am today. Fast forward to now, I hold multiple world records and will continue to farm more. I've competed several times in both statics and street lifting, and actually once in freestyle as well. I've judged multiple battles and will continue to compete further, heading straight to the World Championships one day. I finally have some professional rehab treatments lined up, so you'll be seeing me make a return to statics one day and hopefully competing in that on stage once again. I have made vast progress and accomplished much in this game, but I'm far from finished. We've barely scratched the surface of anything. I want to leave you with a few lessons I have come to learn now on this humble journey of mine as I wrap up the video, with the first point I'd like to credit Charlie Morgan for. So first and foremost, I want you to understand that reality is what you make of it. Your reality is the sum of all of your experiences, or the sum of all of your decisions. Now your decisions are the sum of your perceivable choices. Your choices are the result of your thoughts. Your thoughts are created based on your current paradigm, which means the lens you use to view the world through. Your paradigm is formulated from your beliefs, and your beliefs are forged based on your experiences. And once again, to tie it back, the sum of your experiences will create your reality. And guess what? You're in charge of your experiences, at least for the most part, but definitely your reaction to them. So you're in charge of your reality. Secondly, some things may not be your fault, but it's always your responsibility to react to whatever happens in the appropriate manner. For if you do not take responsibility, then it becomes your fault. Thirdly, and this one resonates with me deeply, loneliness is a tax you must pay to attain a certain complexity of mind. If you keep hiding from it, aimlessly filling that void with company you know that doesn't lift you up, you'll only be dragged down. Learn to sit on the floor in a dark room, in silence, and talk to yourself. Now you might think I'm mad, but those who refuse to face their shadow are the real mad ones. And lastly, you can only appreciate one end of the spectrum if you've experienced the other end. There is no light without dark, no reward without effort. You can only truly appreciate a win if you've lost so many times before that. So don't look at failure for just failure. Look at it as a lesson to be learned from the situation you are placed in, and understand that that same situation will only keep resurfacing until you finally extracted the lesson it has been so long trying to teach you. Time doesn't heal, healing heals, and healing takes time. But if you sit there and simply wait, well, nothing changes if nothing changes. You enjoy the movies where the main character has to struggle before achieving their goal, right? Well, remember, you're the main character, and struggle is inevitable. The only real failure is when you stop trying. No external voice can conquer the one within when the one within has already decided. So I want you to believe in yourself, your capable self. Because when I had no one to believe in me, I had to believe in myself. But I believe in you. Put your faith in God and fully trust in Him. We plan, but He is the best of planners. I'd like to quickly add one final point, being another one of my personal philosophies. The only things you take with you to the grave are your deeds, and the only thing you leave behind is your impact. So if this inspires even one individual, then great, because maybe that individual can go on to inspire many others on my behalf instead. You can become an inspiration to many. Everyone has their own story. If you don't like your current one, you hold the pen and ink in your hand, so you can change it. This is my story, and I'm still writing it.